I only have one regret being on the board, and that is that I don't get to serve under the chairmanship of my dear friend, Jim Breheny. Come on up. Jimmy, you are assuming an office that places a tremendous responsibility upon you. This is the highest role in the association, and it carries with it the need for careful decisions and understanding. Chairing the AZA Board of Directors is not an easy task. Are you mindful of the honor and trust the members have bestowed upon you, and do you accept this challenge?
I am, and I do.
Jimmy, you are now installed as the 94th chair of the board of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Congratulations. You're going to be...
Before I start, I just want to say one of the greatest experiences has been working with the board, but especially Steve. It was about 5 or 6 years ago that he was the chair of the Field Conservation Committee, and the Field Conservation Committee was floundering. And I went to the meeting, and it was the first meeting that he was the chair. And after that meeting was over, I went up to him and I said, you know, hi, Steve, I'm Jim Breheny, I'm from the Bronx Zoo, and I just want to tell you that, you know, I believe in what you're saying, and I'll do anything I can to help you, and we will put the full weight of WCS behind you. And since that day, we have been partners and friends, and you know, I just love the guy, and I love what we and the board have accomplished together in the last couple of years. So it's been the greatest pleasure and greatest ride, so thank you. Now, before I start, Melissa asked me for a little housekeeping thing so I don't get distracted and forget it at the end. For any of you who are interested, the CD or the soundtrack of the music that they're using to play us all on stage will be available for sale as you exit the auditorium, so please pick up your copy because I could see people moving in the seats, actually. I want to start also by saying I thought that panel discussion today, I think the job Bridget did and the panelists was just great. I think she did a great job with it. I think the panelists was great, and I think they told us all what we needed to hear in the simplest terms possible. And my hope is that in my comments that I'm going to make, you know, I can kind of tie all that together. So, the great Carl Jones was here yesterday, and he spoke about from the time he was a little kid, he just wanted to run a zoo. I don't know if I wanted to run a zoo, but I wanted to be around animals. And now, you know, I have the great privilege and the responsibility of 4 zoos in the city of New York and 1 aquarium. And not only do I have the privilege of being responsible for them, but I work with the greatest team of animal and operation educators in the business. And I'm very proud of that and proud of what we achieved together. So I kind of am in the same league with Carl. I ended up in this profession from a kid. I really consider myself lucky to be part of this profession. I'm in it for over 40 years. I grew up at one of the greatest zoological and conservation organizations in the world, at the Bronx Zoo, which is part of the Wildlife Conservation Society. And again, I've been around animals and zoos all my life, and it's part of what defines me. I met my wife, Kathleen, at the zoo. We got the long-suffering Kathleen. I met my wife, Kathleen, at the zoo. We got married at the zoo. You know, the zoo's family. We're all part of a family. And working at the Bronx Zoo is all I ever really wanted to do. And being part of this profession has just been an absolutely amazing experience. One of the high points of my career was being elected to serve on the board of directors. and today is the culmination of that experience. You know, as much as I thought I knew about zoos in 2012 when I joined the board, it was an awakening for me. The AZA has some 230 members, all with different sizes, budgets, different socioeconomic challenges. But we all have one thing in common then, and we still have it in common now, and that's that we want to be the best. That standard that AZA members, AZA zoos and aquariums are the best is ensured by our willingness to go through our rigorous accreditation process. In the 44 years that I worked at the Bronx Zoo, I've seen enormous changes in our profession. And while we all recognize that zoos and aquariums have advanced and evolved tremendously over that time, it's apparent that a portion of the public's not aware of our evolution. And as we know, they can be really vocal about it. The world in which we exist is a complex one. We know how important our work is, and still we struggle sometimes. We struggle because there's also been an evolution and change on the thinking on the part of the public when it comes to wild animals in captive situations. Our success, our ability to move forward, to survive really, comes down to one criteria, and that criteria is one of relevancy. That's a word we started kicking around a couple of years ago, and I'm really, really happy that so many of the speakers embraced that word and referred to it when they were speaking to us, throughout the conference. People are questioning, are zoos and aquariums relevant in the 21st century? Well, we all know the answer, and the answer is yes, right? And I'm going to try to go through some reasons why it should be obvious to more people besides us. Our zoos and aquariums have bold goals and broad responsibilities. In addition to providing the best care and welfare to individual animals, we work cooperatively to sustain species for the future. We are working to ensure that the diversity of species sharing our planet with us today will be sustained and thriving for future generations. That's what makes us relevant. But some people, even our friends and supporters, some of us even in this room, maybe we're not comfortable with every aspect of what we do or some of the species that we keep. In short, I think most people want to support us, but at the same time, they want to feel good about their visits to our zoos and aquariums. And there's a segment of the population that generally has philosophical issues with the idea of keeping wild animals in zoos. They may accept that the animals are well cared for, but they still have this feeling that wild animals belong in the wild. But this growing segment of the population, they may challenge us, but they also provide us with the greatest opportunity to get our message out, that the conservation of species is central to all of our missions. But we're often frustrated because we seem unable to communicate our relevance to those who question us. But is that their fault or ours? I've sat in many rooms over the years surrounded by really smart people who are totally flummoxed by our inability to communicate to others what's so completely obvious to us. We ask ourselves, why don't people get this? Well, and that was one of the points that came out in the panel this morning about, telling stories. I had an experience recently that's made the answer to this question really clear. And it proved to me something that we've heard many, many times is absolutely right. We're all part of this great story. It's just that we're really bad at telling the story. We may not have the appropriate platform or forum. We may be reactionary rather than proactive. We may be hesitant to tell the story itself for some reason. But in this, we've done ourselves a huge disservice. We need to stop being defensive, apologetic, even secretive. We need to engage the public and be absolutely open and transparent about what we do. I found out that it's not really hard to open yourself up. You just have to kind of make up your mind to do it. It may require a bit of a change of culture at your zoo or aquarium. It certainly generates a little angst to put yourself out there. But more than anything, it requires a strength of conviction in what you're doing and what we're all doing together collectively as part of this community. And that shouldn't really be a problem for us, because if we all don't have that strength of conviction in what we're doing, we shouldn't be doing it. Our show, The Zoo on Animal Planet, allowed me and the people that I work with at the Bronx Zoo to tell a story. Creating and producing the show was a natural, organic process. It was a good faith partnership with Discovery, Animal Planet, and our producers. But we thought long and hard about doing this show before we did it. It was 5 years from concept to the premiere. We sweated over it. That kind of openness and transparency was new to us. We had never before let anyone behind the scenes like that. We never gave people that kind of access. But in the end, it was worth it. The zoo gave our audience access to our animals, the staff, how we think, and to all the things that we do every day and take for granted. And we learned again from the panel this morning that that is the cool stuff that we do that people want to know about. And we don't take advantage and tell that story. The zoo gave the audience the access to the staff. Most importantly, the show provided insight to who we are, the level of skill and dedication that we bring to the table, both in caring for animals and working to save species. And allowing people to see that was much more effective than trying to explain it to them. Viewers loved seeing the obvious relationship between the animals and the staff who care for them. That bond resonated with people. It increased their comfort level with the idea of us keeping animals in zoos and aquariums. The other thing that came out really loud and clear was the conservation message was getting through to people. And Animal Planet's own surveys proved that. Learning how zoos and aquariums are working to save animals in the wild increased the audience comfort level and allowed them to think about us in a different light. Hopefully, the show just hasn't told the story about the Bronx Zoo, but it's told the larger story about what happens in all the AZA zoos and aquariums. This experience is proof somehow that we need to tell our collective story in a bigger way than ever before. And I look forward to working with all of you through the course of this year and beyond and figuring out a way just how to do that. People need to understand that our efforts in our zoos and aquariums and in the field are integrated. They're integrated with each other. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, these efforts complement each other really well. AZA zoos and aquariums are actively working to protect and preserve wild animals in nature. That's the message we need to get across. And that is why we are relevant. We need to educate people on these facts, not to simply justify the existence of zoos and aquariums, but to convey the crisis that species face when they come in competition with people for land and other resources. Animals, wild species, rarely win. Carl Jones talked about it yesterday. We have the knowledge, the experience, the skill set to help these remnant wild animal populations. We are unique in our ability to do so. We can help wild species. This is how we are relevant. We want a world where wild animals and humans can both exist. We have a mandate to inspire and instill a sense of awe and wonder. And we're unique in our ability to do so because we can inspire our guests with living animals. And if we're successful in connecting the animals in our zoos and aquariums to the plight of species in the wild, our members, our visitors, and public, they'll join with us in our mission to advocate for and save species. Now, advocacy is new for us, and some people think maybe advocacy is a bad word. Advocacy is a good word. We all advocate for animals. We advocate for species. Look what happened. Look how successful we were when we joined together for 96 elephants. We created a movement that achieved incredible, tangible results. We made a difference for elephants. This is how we're relevant. As AZA zoos and aquariums, we don't exist to be well-run menageries. That's not why I do this. We have a higher purpose. and that higher purpose is the conservation of species in the wild. In the past 5 years, our collective contribution to field conservation has gone from $150 million to over $216 million this year. If we can maintain this movement, if we can maintain this amount, we can state that every 5 years, AZA Zoos and Aquariums dedicate $1 billion to the conservation of wild species around the world. That's an amazing number, and we own it, and it's something we should celebrate, and we don't celebrate it enough. But as well as we're doing, most of that $200 million this year came from about 50 of our members. As a community and as an association, we have to do better. As we said before, Chris and Steve, the goal is for each AZA zoo and aquarium to contribute 3% of its operating budget towards field conservation. If we can achieve that, that $200 million number will grow, will increase exponentially. There are few other organizations dedicating this magnitude of resources to ensure the survival of species for future generations. This is how we can answer our critics. If we are to truly speak of ourselves in terms of agents of conservation, we all have to put our money where our mouth is. Remember today, Bridget said, conservation is not a concept, a philosophy. It's a verb, okay? If we're going to have integrity, we all have to walk the walk. This is how we are relevant. We don't need to be defensive. We just need to be the best at what we do. As members of AZA, we need to be above reproach. We need to continue to challenge ourselves, and we need to answer the challenge that other people will bring to us. But that is not something to fear. That's only going to make us better. That's what's going to allow us to continue to be the best at what we do. At the Bronx Zoo, I had Bill Conway as my mentor. And one disappointing thing is Bill wasn't able to come here today, but I'm wearing his tie, and so he's with me in spirit. And Conway always told me, he said, if you're going to keep an animal, you keep it well. We need to constantly critique our exhibits, review the species that we keep. If we have an exhibit that's not up to standards, we need to fix it or we need to shut it down. If we have an individual animal or a species that we can't provide for properly, we need to phase it out of our collection. Right now at the Bronx Zoo, we have 2 major exhibit buildings, the Monkey House and the World of Darkness, that are closed. They're closed because they no longer meet our standards for exhibiting animals. This type of honest self-scrutiny gives us credibility and reinforces our commitment to animal welfare and modern zoological practices. It will serve as proof to our critics of 2 really important things: that AZA zoos and aquariums continue to evolve as the best in our profession, and that as zoo and aquarium professionals, we have a conscience. It all comes down to this. We need to provide the best care and welfare for the individual animals we keep. We must manage the species we keep sustainably for the future. And we must work to connect our animals and exhibits to species in the wild and use them to inspire and empower our visitors to support our efforts to save them. The last point is an extremely important one. As members of this association, we must be active agents of conservation. We must continue to challenge ourselves to increase our efforts and fundings for saving species and protecting the areas in which they live. To continue that conservation mandate, $1 billion for conservation every 5 years, to grow that number. That's what's going to guarantee we will be relevant for future generations. None of this is easy, but almost anything worth doing is hard. But look around this room. I know so many people in the room. Look around this room at your friends and your colleagues. We are passionate, dedicated professionals, and we are up for this challenge. Remember this, conservation is a verb, not a concept. The decisions and the commitments that we make today will be what decides if there is a nature tomorrow. We have a huge responsibility, and we must deliver on it. And that, my friends, is why AZA zoos and aquariums are relevant. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you this year and for years to come.
Very good. All right, thank you very, very much, Jim. On behalf of every AZA member, we wish you a great year and look forward to working with you to realize this exceptionally optimistic and forward-looking vision.